about the history of Africa and our people. And I think it's something all of our children need to know. And if you look in the church, you'll see that we don't have a blonde, blue-eyed Jesus. We have a Jesus that we hope looks like the Jesus that came to earth to give us all the information to lead us. And we have a picture in the back that's not finished. Some of the members wanted to take it down, but we said no, because the story's not finished yet. It hasn't ended. Again, welcome, and you're always welcome to our church.
Good day, good afternoon. Hotep, Uja Seneb, Akwaba. We'd like to, we are pleased to have you join us on this day. And we are appreciative to St. Augustine Episcopal Church for having us back in this space. And this is a part of this presentation you'll have today, this seminar you'll have today is really a part of the Youngstown State University Black History Month schedule. And if he would feel okay about it, I would like to invite Dr. Wantata to come up and share a few words about Black History Month. He is the Director of Africana Studies at Youngstown State University.
Yes, it has to do with the color of our skin, but it's much deeper than that. Yesterday we heard from one of our prominent local experts from Kent State talk about arts, and the civil rights movement. This is even equally, if not more important, the classical civilization of black people that are so endangered. But to have somebody like Professor Ampim do this and to be committed to this project is very encouraging. So we cannot give up at this point. I just want to thank all of you for showing up today. And as much as I can do in my position at the university, as much as I can sometimes pretend to do what is right so that the powers that be don't neglect to support us, I would do it. Because this is our life. And Brother Kay has been at the forefront of this fight. And Brother Vince has also been an active militant of a radical nature, radical in a very positive sense. So I encourage my students to show up. Last night they showed up. I would hope that there are a few of them who are also here. And that this is just the beginning of an ongoing fight. Why? Because the enemy is up in arms. We know that the times are hard, but they're not hopeless. Because for our president to have been elected the second time shows that it was not just a flash in the night. That our endurance and actual persistence in this country and in the world will continue to have a lasting impact. Thanks so much. I'm still
This is also a program that's being co-sponsored by the P. Ross Berry Historical Society. Of course, many of you know the founder, Ben Shivers. He didn't want to come up here and make any remarks, so I'll let y'all chastise him later. But this is co-sponsored with Africana Studies and the P. Ross Berry Historical Society. Our presenter for today is Professor Manu Ampim. I first met, or first became aware of Professor Ampim, I think in 2004. I was a member of a e-group called Tassetti, and so was Ampim and a few others who had an interest in Nile Valley civilizations. And you know, this was an e-group that was composed of various folk. It wasn't just a race-based email group or e-group. It had a whole lot of folks who were dealing in the area of ancient Egyptian studies and Nile Valley studies. And you know, some folks would post some things, and you know, we would see how Ampim would come on and just totally destroy a lot of their positions based on primary resources. Professor Ampim is a historian and primary researcher. He is the director of advancing the research. He is the coordinator of the Save Nubia project, which we will hear more about today. He currently teaches history at Contra Costa College in San Pablo, California, and also Africana Studies Study Abroad course at Merritt College in Oakland. And online, he offers a 7-step primary research methodology course through advancing the research. And of course, if you're interested in that, if you want to strengthen your research skills, I would strongly suggest that you talk with Professor Ampim after this is over. He is the author of several publications, most of which I have with me. Probably one of the most seminal books that I've ever come across, Towards Black Community Research, Moving Beyond the Limitations of the Lecture Model. For those of you who travel in the African Center circles, you know the lecture model is very, very strong. But after you leave, it doesn't provide you with any skills or any follow-up skills to help you determine and access information. This is a very serious book that Ampim has written. And I would strongly recommend it. He has a few copies here. I would strongly recommend that you pick this book up because as we are developing study groups, and those who are members of the study group that I help facilitate would tell you that I just don't get up there and talk. I certainly encourage folks to go into the text and assess some of the information for themselves, and let's have a conversation about what you got out of it, and let's have a conversation developed around that. But we have to move beyond just presenting information to folks, and then we just leave and then nothing else happens. We have to help develop skills. This is a skill-based piece. So, very serious book that I would certainly encourage you to pick up. He also has, and you can actually download this off the website, a very serious essay series called Vanishing Evidence of Classical African Civilizations. And you can just go online, manoampim.com, and download this. But this is a very serious piece in terms of the disappearing evidence of African culture that's happening right before your eyes in terms of the classical African civilizations. He also has essays that were published in a book called Egypt, the Child of Africa, by the late great Ivan van Sertima. And interestingly, I had read this book years ago, but just like any other person I had read, the essays in here, but even when I met Ampim, it still didn't click until I saw it. And I said, oh yeah, I remember those essays. So the late great Ivan van Sertima, one of several books that he put out, Egypt, the Child of Africa. Ampim has actually some essays in there. Without further ado, I'll bring Professor Ampim.
Good afternoon, how's everybody?
Good afternoon.
Okay, good to see you all. I want to thank our brother Namdi and everyone else who was responsible for me being here this afternoon. I come all the way from California, and I was on the plane, and I'm looking out and I see snow and ice. And even though I went to Morgan State University for a number of years in Baltimore, I had a choice when I went to Europe to do research in the archives, the museums, the institutes, the libraries. I had an option to stay on the East Coast or move back to California. When I took a look at the weather options, I decided to move back to California. So to see snow, even though I lived on the East Coast for a number of years, it's still a little bit strange for me. So anyway, I'm definitely glad to be here. And I'm also glad to be able to share with you the fruits of my primary research that I've been conducting now for about a quarter century. Now, and I just want to share with you that I'm a professional historian. And I was talking to Brother Namdi on the way from the airport this morning that, sometimes people have titles, but that's not necessarily titles that they have gone to school or do as a profession. I'm a professional historian. So I actually teach at Contra Costa College Africana Studies and History. So every semester I have about roughly 230 to 250 or 60 students a semester. And so that's really what I do. And so I'm always excited to be able to share not only the benefits of my research, but also the research methods, because that's absolutely important. And really there's a difference between a historian and someone who simply teaches history. They're not the same. They're fundamentally different. So let me give you an analogy. There's a difference between a trained mechanic who works on cars and a part changer. A part changer is just someone who can say, you know what, you have engine problems, so I don't know what the problem is, I don't have the tools or the ability to assess the problem, so why don't I just change the spark plugs? Maybe that might help it run better. And that may or may not work. So the part changer would go through a series of changing parts, hoping to solve the problem, whether it's spark plugs or distributor wires, distributor cap, and then oftentimes they charge the customer for all these bad decisions, and they're simply going through this by trial and error because they don't know. They really don't have the training to be able to diagnose the problem and say for sure what is the issue and why your car is not running well. That's a part changer. On the other hand, a professional mechanic is someone who can diagnose the problem, and they're clear about what their problem is before they start randomly ordering parts. So I agree, they both are working on the same car, but one has no real methods to speak of, and the other one is trained in diagnosis and solving problems. So they're completely different in their level of training. Same thing between a historian and someone who just teaches history. Someone who just teaches history is someone who just gets information from everywhere, any and every source. They don't have the ability to scrutinize or to determine if this source is credible or not. That's like a lawyer just calling a witness to the stand and not cross-examining that person, examining their background, their credibility, their character, or their motive for even coming forth. So all witnesses are not the same. They don't have the same credibility. So a good lawyer would examine the credibility of the witness. So because he or she has the skills. But somebody who just teaches history is the opposite. They get information from everywhere and they don't really have a knowledge of if it is true or not, if it's correct or not. And that's why many of us get did you know emails, and some people say this sounds strange. I don't know if it's true, but if it is, I want to make sure that people in my network know about it, so they hit the forward button. That's somebody that really doesn't have the training in dissecting the quality of information. But on the other hand, the historian has the methodological tools, the training, the skills to be able to determine the truth from falsehood, fact from fiction. Because there's a lot of historical fiction that's presented, and my work is really to address these issues. That's why the publisher contacted me about publishing my essays on exposing, for example, the Willie Lynch myth. It's one of the greatest myths in the Western Hemisphere, but it continues to live on. But nevertheless, my work in the field of Africana studies has taken me to not only museums and archives throughout the Western world, but extensive field work in Africa. So since 1990, I've been fortunate enough to do extensive field work at pyramid sites, temples, tombs, and ancient residential sites. And I was excited about documenting the greatness of African culture and traditions. And then I started to see a systematic pattern that behind the scenes, conspirators were systematically, as I call, de-Africanizing images and inscriptions in archives, in temples, in tombs. And so that became an overriding concern of mine, because we can't talk about African greatness without evidence. Because in the realm of serious scholarship, documentation beats conversation every day of the week. We can always talk, but it comes down to documentation. And I noticed this systematic pattern of erasing paints, changing facial features on reliefs and statues, and then even more recently, even an ongoing problem is, and it's increasing, is the building of dams. So there are now dam projects up and down the Nile River that threaten to turn this living entity into a series of isolated lakes. So while we look at African greatness and some of the greatest monuments in the history of the world, it's clear that many of them, or some of them, are not going to be around in the near future as these dams are being built. So that's what I want to share today with you, is really ancient Kush in Nubia under threat. So, and we formed the Save Nubia project, so I wanted to share with you about some of our work. So I just came back from the Sudan last month. I was there to really look at the current situation, because you really have to do extensive work in the field to stay abreast. There's so many things that happen while we're here. Like I learned many, many new things last month and in December. Now, I think many of you know that Sudan has been split. So now there's regular Sudan and there's South Sudan. So as of July 2011, South Sudan is the newest country in the world. There was a referendum and the people in the South voted to become an independent country. So where I go to is not the South Sudan, but in Sudan proper. And this is an area where there's an extensive number of dams that are being built and scheduled to be built that I want to share with you today. So here's my colleague Sorwat. He's a great colleague that's always been helpful, helping me to do the work in the field. So he was with me this last month to do the work. And I don't really have to emphasize this with you, but many times people believe that Egypt and even the Sudan has somehow detached itself from Africa and floated off to a region called the Middle East. I can assure you I was there last month, and the landmass is still a part of Africa today as it was in the past. So we're talking about African civilizations, to say the least. So the three classical African civilizations are Kush, Nubia, and Kemet. In that order, Kush came first. And one of my campaigns is to bust up this nonsense that in the northern part of the continent you have Egypt, which was more or less non-African, and that the non-Africans in the north went south to teach the real Africans in Kush and Nubia, and that the people in Kush and Nubia simply learned from those in the north. But really, it's the other way around. Kush is the oldest and the first of these great African civilizations. And I'll show you a map just to give you an idea of where these are, but it's Kush, Nubia, and then Kemet in that chronological order. Now, the reason why we use the word classical is because the meaning of classical, sure, we can call these ancient African civilizations, but it's more accurate, I think. I think it's more powerful to say classical. We hear about classical, what? Music, classical theater, what else? Classical, okay, classic cars, classical literature, classical dance. So what does classical mean? Because this term is also applied to civilizations. But what does it mean? And by the way, when somebody, about 99.9% of the time, when someone mentions classical civilizations, they only mean Greece and Rome. Nobody says the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome, because it's understood that these are, in most circles, the only classical civilizations. So when someone says classical civilization, you know automatically. That's why there's classics departments all over the country, all over North America, and every single one of them exclusively deal with Greece and Rome, to the exclusion of every other culture in the world. And so we've been challenging this. This is why we call these classical African civilizations. So what does classical actually mean? What would you say is the definition of classical? Why would I put so much emphasis on using that term as opposed to simply ancient? Okay, original first, that's definitely right there. Very close. What else? What can we say? You with me over here on the right, on the left side this afternoon? Anybody said original first? Yes, ma'am?
Extraordinary.
Extraordinary, okay, that's pretty good.
And something that's overrun, it will last forever.
Okay, excellent. Something that has permanent and lasting value. The prototype, the model, the guide, the example, the standard. That which everything else is judged by. That's what we mean by classical. That's what we must call these classical African civilizations. We're talking about the apex of human achievement. How can somebody have a classic UC Berkeley, or Oxford, or Cambridge, or Harvard, or Stanford, and then exclusively deal with Greece and Rome? You know what I call this? Academic fraud. Anytime you can allure students to a classroom and focus only on Europe to the exclusion of every other culture in the world, the students are not getting what they bargained for. So it's fraudulent academic activity. Be honest. If you're going to focus only on Europe, call it the classes department of Europe, or the European classes department. So at least students know what they're getting when they matriculate in these institutions, because if there's a classical European department, it must be classical African department and other traditions. How are you going to focus at schools? It's not superior about Greece or Rome. Nothing at all. In fact, there's classical civilizations in other parts of the world. There's classical East Indian civilization. There's classical Chinese, civilization. There's classical Islamic civilization. There's classical Mayan civilization. You certainly have classical African civilization. So I dare these people to have a classes department and focus only on Europe. There's no way this can be defended. So we've taken the term from them. We don't allow them to use classical civilizations exclusively, because of African greatness must be put at the apex of human achievement. It's at the pinnacle of greatness. And there's nothing superior about Greece. Society was based on slavery. As a matter of fact, some of you, I'm sure you saw some, or at least most of the Athens Olympics. And that was in 2008, I believe, was in Athens. And then they have this, every time they have Olympics every 4 years, they give a little history of the country. And I saw these people before the world say that democracy was born, as they normally say, in the 5th grade, 8th grade, 10th grade, whenever the students had to take world history or social studies, they learned about democracy supposedly was created in Athens, Greece, in the 5th century BCE. And yet at the same time, we know democracy means the government, of the people, for the people, by the people. How are you going to have a government of the people, for the people, by the people, when 90% of the people in Greece had no rights? They couldn't vote, couldn't hold office. These people had no political rights. In fact, they weren't even considered citizens. Only 10% of the people in Greece were even considered citizens. That means 90% weren't. So who were the citizens? It was the male elite that had a lot of wealth and property. And the other 90% had no rights whatsoever. So who was in that 90%? You name the group, they're going to fall in. So who was in the 90% in Greece who had no rights? Any group you name is going to fit. So who? Women? Who else? The poor? Foreigners? And they had a huge slave class. So how are you going to tell us about a democracy? There's no democracy. It was based on slavery. Did any of you, I don't teach history simply from movies, because people have artistic license, and I'm out from California. I know what Hollywood can do. They can distort a message just like that. But did any of you see the movie The Gladiator? Was it not brutal? Was that not savagery in full display? How do you make that some classical tradition? It makes no sense whatsoever. So anyway, that's why we've taken the term from them. And these are classical African civilizations. So let me just share with you about Kush and a little bit about Nubia. So Kush is important because it goes back to the Stone Age. I remember I was doing a presentation not that long ago, and one of the brothers in the audience said, "You know what, Professor, you really shouldn't say Stone Age. You say Kush goes so far back, and it goes back into the Stone Age." He felt Stone Age was negative. I said, "Who do you think you're talking to?" I've seen the most powerful monuments in the history of humanity built from stone. So what do you know about stone? Know that the pyramids are built with stone. These were master builders with granite and limestone and any kind of stone you mentioned. Basalt, graywack, sandstone. These are the greatest builders in the world. So I said, you need to change your understanding of what's meant by the Stone Age, because you got a superior level of technology then. So yeah, it does go back to the stone. In other words, we don't even have a specific date. The further we go back, it seems to be ready-made. And so we're talking about, I'll show you the map, but the Horn of Africa, and then there's some important centers or cities that I'll show you, Meroe, Dongola, Kerma. And as far as we know, Kush, or the Greeks later called it Ethiopia, is the oldest state on record. It's the oldest organized state. So we'll cover that a little bit, but it's a highly advanced civilization, and it requires that we do additional work and research. This is, if anybody was doing any research, these are the sources of information, or categories of information on Kush. To know more about Kush is the biblical evidence. So Genesis chapter 10, we call it the Table of Nations, deals with the evidence about Kush and the birth of Kush. And then there's records from Egypt or Kemet, there's archaeological evidence, and then Greek and Roman records. You all know that Noah had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and so theologians argue that Ham is the progenitor or the ancestor of those of African descent. And then Ham had noticed that according to the biblical text, chapter 10 in Genesis, that Kush came first. Kush, and then they say Mizraim or Egypt, Punt, and then Canaan. So these are all descendants of the African or the black ancestor Ham. So we can learn something about Kush based on the biblical evidence. There's records from Kemet, and there's Harkuf and Queen Hatshepsut. Their records are very important and tell us about going up south. Because as you go to the south, the mountains are in the south. So going up south, the records of Harkuf and Hatshepsut. Then there's many archaeological discoveries, artifacts, major monuments, and the Greek and Roman writers. They give us so much about Kush. So if we were doing a seminar, we would go through these sources of information. Here's some classical texts from the early 20th century. Like, for example, Drusilla Dungy Houston's classic work, The Wonderful Ethiopians of the Ancient Kushite Empire. And so we don't know what the word Kush means, but that's the oldest term for the region, which I'll show you a detailed map. The Greeks couldn't pronounce any words or any names, so they changed the area from Kush to Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is certainly a Greek word. They called the people Ethiops, which means black-faced, burnt-faced, or kissed by the sun. People say that people in antiquity were not concerned about skin color. Oh, yes, they were. They were very concerned about skin color. You look at the Roman amphitheater. The Romans, the most prized person to put out in the arena to fight it out or be devoured by a hungry lion or a tiger or bear were not just slaves, but black-skinned slaves. And then you have the Greeks naming the people Ethiops because of their skin color. Even the current name Sudan, Belad el Sudan is where it comes from. This is an Arabic phrase meaning land of the blacks. This is the current name for Sudan. So people definitely were struck by skin color. Yeah, we can say that maybe it wasn't the same racism that we know today, but to say that people weren't concerned about color is contrary to the evidence. Even this place named Ethiopia is an example of people concerned about color. So Drusilla Houston used both names, the Wonderful Ethiopians of the Ancient Kushite Empire, 1926, and then the great John Jackson and his small pamphlet, Ethiopia and the Origin of Civilization. And then William Leo Hansberry never wrote any books, but he's a great pioneer. His student, Joseph Harris, edited the William Leo Hansberry African History Notebook. Because William Leo Hansberry taught at Howard University, he created the African section of the history department in 1922. A great pioneer, but he never wrote any books. So his student published his works. This book also had a major impact on me when I was an undergraduate student back in the 1980s, and this is Ethiopia and the Missing Link in African History by Reverend Sterling Means. So this is a 1945 text that had a major impact as I was learning about the power and the influence of Kush, or what has been renamed Ethiopia. Here's the great Hansberry. He's the father of African studies because he pioneered the area and he knew more than his professors. It was hard for him to defend his PhD dissertation because he knew more than his professors. But Hansberry is someone who pioneered in presenting the importance of Kush or Ethiopia. So it's a problem now that people have forgotten about the antiquity of Ethiopia, but not early pioneers such as Hansberry, who was presenting this at Howard University back in 1922. So there's a 2-volume work of the William Leo Hansberry African History Notebook. And if you want to learn about what the Greek and Roman writers said, volume 2 is the one you want. Africa and Africans as seen by, and he's using this term, classical writers. When he says classical, I know you can't really see that too well. When he says classical writers, he means the writers from what 2 cultures? Greece and Rome. And so people buy into this classical idea. I don't. And here's one of the prominent students of Hansberry and the great Chancellor Williams. And this book had more impact on me than any other single book that I've ever read. because Chancellor Williams, in his classic work, The Destruction of Black Civilization, this is the culmination of field research in Africa that he did in 26 nations and among 105 different language groups. He followed in the footsteps of his teacher. Hansberry went to England to study, so did Chancellor Williams. Hansberry then went and did field work in Africa, so did Chancellor Williams, but Chancellor Williams took it to a different level into 26 different countries. And his book, The Destruction of Black Civilization, was going to be a 2-volume work, but he was losing his eyesight, so it's just a 1 volume, but it has become a classic, first published in 1971. One of the things about his book is that this is the first time I saw a map of what he called the Ethiopian Empire, but we know this as the Kushite Empire. Tremendous insight that very few people have even now. Because if you take a look at the map, Chancellor Williams includes, notice he says the Ethiopian Empire. And here is current day Sudan. This is the Nile River here that you see flowing from south to north. But he has here Nubia or southern Ethiopia. This is amazing insight. And then he has Kim, this should be Kemet, or so-called ancient Egypt, which is the northern part of Ethiopia. So Chancellor Williams understood the relationship of these civilizations, that this was a vast empire of the Kushites, and emerging out of that, in the southern part was Nubia, and then down north, emerging much later was Kemet. So he understood that Nubia and Kemet, these civilizations, they emerged out of a much larger Ethiopian or Kushite empire. And so this is what I've been pursuing for years, and that's why this map is so important, because I understood this. I use this as kind of a working model as I went out in the field and went to the archives. But Ethiopia or Kushite civilization actually came first. I wish I could say more, but I want to show you other slides. So what I did, I created this map here. This is a brand new map. And I would say that you can go online and search high and low. You're not going to find any accurate maps produced by laypersons or scholars of Kush. And so I created this because there's so much confusion. It's amazing how confusing it is when people are talking about Kush and Nubia. Like, how many of you have heard, let me give you an example of this group of people called Egyptologists. What about a Nubiologist? Have you even heard of that term before? What about, check this one out, what about a Kushologist? You ever heard of a Kushologist? They don't exist. This is a whole nother level of thinking and research. So what we have Western mainstream Egyptologists from outside of Africa who try their best to distort the history of this area, who then go up south and they further distort this area. They know nothing. They absolutely know nothing. It's absolutely amazing the levels of distortion. These people know nothing. They have no concept of becoming a Kushologist or a Nubiologist. They don't know. They just write about these subjects and create all kind of misinformation. So anyway, the ancient Kushite Empire, you probably can see this a little bit, but this is the area. So current day Egypt, the Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, this is all Somalia here, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Eritrea, and then on the east side of the Red Sea, Saudi Arabia and Yemen. At one point, this was all a part of the Kushite Empire before the emergence of Nubia and before the emergence of Kemet, or so-called ancient Egypt. This is a map basically from about 4,000 before the Common Era. And so this is my pursuit. And this area here is the heartland of the Kushite Empire in current day Sudan. So in the northern part of Sudan, this is the area where the kings ruled from. There's at least 223 pyramids in Sudan. All of them are in this area here. The temples are in this area here. The rulership resided in this area here in northern Sudan. And I'll mention later, but this is where a series of dams are being built that's going to flood and continue to flood and destroy the area. But this is all a part of the ancient Kushite Empire. So this is what draws me to the area to continue my field research. So we've created the map, and I'm in the process of creating a detailed chronology with first-hand sources of how Kush emerged, and then Nubia and Kemet. Chancellor Williams also said that this is the greatest of all issues. They're right here in the general agreement that the very earliest period known to mankind, an African civilization in the areas later called the Sudan and Egypt, was fully developed with all the arts of civilized life already matured, its beginnings being placed so far back into the early history of the world that it is beyond the reach of man. He says that the civilization in this area goes so far back into the Stone Age that we can't even put a date on it. It's beyond our reach. So I'll show you monuments, and when I show you some of the monuments in Sudan produced by the mighty Kushite builders, what's extraordinary is that imagine that beneath that is a whole nother level of civilization that is yet to be excavated. Jesse Williams, what a teacher. He's teaching about what needs to be done to study black civilization independent of either Europe or Asia. There's no need to reference them. They're not that important. They're not. So he says field work is of highest importance. He writes about this in the preview of his book. It had the greatest impact on me because he lays everything out. So when he says so vast and untapped is the real history of the African race that I myself only scratch the surface of what is yet to be done. Some of the areas to be explored by future historians are set forth in pages which follow in this chapter. And he lays out step by step what has to be done. Now the reason why I highlighted future historians, because I did not really see this as an abstract statement. I actually took it personal. I really did. I put myself in there. So when he had future historians, I put Manu and Ampim, because I thought he was talking directly to me about what needs to be done. So I took it on as a personal. In fact, I didn't choose the mission chose me. I read the man's work, and next thing I know, I'm out in the field doing what he said should be done. On a dime. I've been to 19 countries and have never had a grant or a scholarship, anything. As a matter of fact, I was only able to survive by doing work and research because I was able to manage a dime. I was never broke. Of course, I didn't have a cash flow. I was never broke, but I just didn't have any money. There's a difference between broke and not having money. I just didn't have the money. I was never broke. I thought I was rich. And when I first actually went to do field work in Egypt, I was excited. I had found a place that was $1.50 a night. What was in that room other than a bed? Nothing. There's nothing there, just a bed and some walls. And the toilet was the bathroom down the hall with the shower and the toilet. So it was a muddy mess, but whatever. I was just excited to be there. And when I was in Europe before that, I slept on trains, train stations, wherever I needed to do to go and do the work. So when he talks about the field work, I was just struck by his commentary. This is a man who had been out in the field. So he says on page 35 that the story of how such an advanced civilization was lost is one of the greatest and most tragic in human history and should be the main focus of research in African history. He writes this again in 1971. When I read this in the 80s, I took it very seriously. So anyway, let me skip past this. So National Geographic has got involved. You have people now talking about the black pharaohs. Oh yeah, so on the front cover of National Geographic, February 2008, when African scholars started to take control of our own history and talk about the Nile Valley as a part of the African civilization complex. Then you had mainstream people said, you know what? We're going to fight you on that, but we also now are going to direct your attention to the South. We want you all to start thinking about and looking at the real black pharaohs. There weren't really any real black pharaohs in Kemet or Egypt. So we want you to start looking at the black pharaohs in the 25th dynasty who came late. What about the first 24 dynasty? No, we can't talk about that. We want you to focus on the ones in the 25th dynasty, and we want you to start calling them the black pharaohs to do what? Suggest that all the other ones before that were what? Were not black. This is nothing more than, why do you say the black pharaohs? That's like somebody saying the wet rain. We know by definition the rain is wet, so what's your point? Or somebody running around talking about the Sahara Desert. Well, in Arabic, Sahara means desert, so why repeat? So what we know the pharaohs were black, so what are you talking about? But they distort this, and now I can tell you that this book here by Robert Moorcock, written in 1999, The Black Pharaohs, I don't know if Moorcock coined the term, but he certainly is the one that popularized it. And he doesn't even know what he's talking about. He's got an image here of the great Taharqa, who was a Kushite king But yet his subtitle is Egypt's Nubian rulers. He's not a Nubian, he's from Kush. The man doesn't even know. And here he is, smiling because he's selling a whole lot of books here as he misleads the public. And I had some dealings with Robert Moorcock when I lived in Europe in 89 and 90. And all I can say is, what a fellow. Let me just give you one example of what happens in these circles. I was at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. This is I think this is probably in early 90, but I was there for a year doing the research. So I'd met with Robert a couple of times, and they were grooming him to be a specialist on the civilizations in the Sudan. He was doing tours, talks in the British Museum, talks at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies. And one time he did a presentation on Martin Bernal's book, Black Athena. And it was about 25 people there, and it was myself and maybe one other person that looked like me. The rest didn't. So then Robert Moorcock goes and gives his presentation and launches a systematic attack and a complete dismissal of black scholars. Everything he mentioned was absolutely was negative. He gave them credit for doing nothing. Now, to me, it would be honest if you have some criticism, but yet you give credit where credit's due. He gave no credit. The man launched an attack on black scholars in the talk, and then you would never believe what he did right after he finished his talk. He came over to me. He said, "Manu, I'm sorry for my comments." I said, "Robert, I have no respect for your apology because you did public damage on purpose, and then you want to give me a private apology." As I said, your statements were negative, they were unbalanced, and they're not even honest. You know all that couldn't be true. You gave them credit for nothing, now you want to apologize in private, so I don't respect that. So anyway, this is the man that popularized this idea of the black pharaohs. Anyway, this is what I did. These red dots represent collections of ancient Kush, Nubian, collections of Kemet in Western Europe and the U.S. That's why I've had to spend so much time in the West, because you see that the artifacts have been stolen. There's more artifacts outside of Africa than on the African continent. So that's why I had to go to so many different countries doing pioneering research, all in archives. And I learned from Chancellor Williams. I started in England and I went to all the other countries that had artifacts because I was concerned about, like this, the theft. And this is Belzoni's work, the Italian circus man that turned into a so-called archaeologist. Here you have theft on a grand scale. In 1816, you have Ramses II being stolen, literally, from his temple. And you see here is like a placard or a platform with laws, operating as wheels. But so this is where it is today at the British Museum. To this place, so the theft has been pretty significant. That's why I've had to do the work. And then you have collections like the Boston Museum of Fine Art. There was no permanent Kushite and Nubian collection in the world until African scholars had made inroads, and then Boston and so many other places decided to take from the basement these Kushite artifacts and put them on display, and then give us misinformation about them. Here you have a queen on the throne, you have columns from temples, here you have An-Milani as Feltus, some powerful Kushite rulers. You see a person here, and you see a student with a backpack. There are sarcophagus or coffins here, and here's a image of Asfelta, one of the powerful Kushite rulers. I know you can't see this that well, but the Boston Globe of 1923 says King Asfelta's sarcophagus is too heavy for the art museum floor. And this is his sarcophagus, where he's buried in 13.5 tons. This Kushite built on an extraordinary level. Take a look at the craftsmanship involved with this bracelet of Het Meru. Look how beautiful that is, sitting on the throne. The symbol of life, the Ankh, the staff. This is beautiful. These are Kushite artifacts. A lot of people, I'm going to put in quotations, so-called experts, because they're not Kushologists. These are mainstream Egyptologists who know the glyphs. Clearly this says that these are Kushites. And these are Kushite princes. Look at the beautiful art. Notice the color scheme. When they want to show depth, different people in depth, notice you have black and brown, the beautiful almond-shaped eyes. Notice the wigs and the crowns on top indicating their very high status. Look how great the artists were, the jewelry, the beautiful sandals, their dress, their attire. See the official, the attendant here. And notice, you probably can't see this that well, but can you make this out? The servant with his arms here, he has something over his arm. Right here. This is a leopard skin outfit. And you still have leopard skins being used today in the same area. Ethiopia, Uganda. So when someone has a leopard skin outfit on, you know that they're either a king, a chief, a pharaoh, a priest, somebody of extremely high status, or maybe even an elder. You find leopards all over the area. And then this is none other than gold. And this is the symbol for gold. And when you see 3, it means plural. So that means a whole lot of gold. You got 3 and 3. And then these 3 dots here, it represents gold, Nebu. And so that's why we believe that the word Nubia, or Nub, means gold. So Nubia is the land. By the way, there's a gold rush today, 2013 in the Sudan. There's people all over northern Sudan panning for gold. Everywhere they're looking for gold. People, anytime they know somebody from the U.S. or Europe or Australia, wherever they are from in a Western country, they want you to bring gold finding equipment to find gold. But in ancient times, they also use gold. Notice these gold objects here. What do you think this might be? If you can see this. 4,000-year-old artifact. Looks like origins of the modern tweezer. Here you got something that looks like an ashtray. I don't know what they used it for. I don't know what they might have been smoking, but and you have other artifacts beautifully made. There's nothing more special than alabaster. It's a very amazing stone, to say the least. Take a look at the craftsmanship. These are artifacts from Kush. Look at the bed. The craftsmanship is at its best. This would have been cedar wood. You know, Sahara is a desert. You know that there's not much wood in the desert environment because you don't have trees. So they would trade with the people of Lebanon and get cedar wood for certain things like beds and other objects. And then you can't make it out, but these are the hooves of a cow. And when you see the ancient times, 3 and 4 and 5,000 years old, you know that these are indigenous Africans making these items because they're close to nature. When foreigners come in, there's no more nature. So if you didn't know anything else, when there's no animals involved, you know these are foreigners who came in who are not close to nature at all. So even the designs here, you have animals on the headboard and hooves. Sometimes it's the hooves of a cow or the claws of a lion, but always something representing natural. Then you have gold rings. I found these in the Royal Ontario collection in Toronto. Very amazing. And here, even on the ring, you have a vulture here. You have to kind of turn your head sideways, and then this is the cobra, both representing protection on the ring. I'll skip this, but there's a lot to do on the language still. A place called Meroe, there's a Meroe that still has to be translated. And the reason why we know how to read hieroglyphs of Medu Neter, just to give you a comparison, is because of the Rosetta Stone that was found in 1799. And it took more than 20 years to decipher the hieroglyphs. Because this is a message in 3 separate languages. Hieroglyphics, Hieratic, which is a cursive form, and then this is Greek. So scholars could read Greek, and they knew that this was the same message in 3 different languages. So what they did was they matched the Greek characters up one by one with the Medu Neter hieroglyphic characters to translate. So usually bilingual or trilingual help us to learn more about or to decode a language. And that has not been done with the script further south in Sudan. And look at the closeness to nature. The Sudanese artifacts are amazing. On the left, you have a soldier. Here he is with his bow in hand. He's standing. This is his head. He's facing towards me. And here is one of the highest rewards a person can get on the battlefield. It's a fly pendant. A pendant of a fly. That's one of the highest honors of valor. And so they didn't see flies as a pest. They saw them as valuable enough to give them. Notice the chain as well. This is a fly pendant given to a soldier because of his valor on the battlefield. You say, why a fly? Well, think about it. Flies tend to be very persistent. Wouldn't you agree? They don't give up. So to me, it makes a whole lot of sense. So rather than running and seeing flies as insignificant insects, even the kings, every king was associated with the bee. It's amazing. The bee comes in a room and people are ducking and hiding and bobbing and weaving and ready to get out of there. But they had the greatest value for flies and bees, closeness to nature. This is when African civilization was at its height, when they were close to nature in this way. Here you have all kinds of, I'm struck by the blacktop pottery. You know what's significant about this? You can look at the blacktop pottery in current day Egypt, current day Sudan. You can look at it from any era you want. I can tell you one thing, in most cases you can't even determine or distinguish, is it from Kush or Nubia or Kemet? And one of the things that distinguishes one culture from another is pottery. That's very unique and particular. But the blacktop pottery, so it's one united what culture. You find. And we know that just from the pottery, if nothing else. I'll just skip through this. We know about pyramids in Egypt. This is the first stone building in the world, the step pyramid. And people know about this. And by the way, these are people here, just to give you an idea of the size of this monument. So we know about the ones that's tile inside. You can see this tile in the Cairo Museum in Egypt, or the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And here's the man that commissioned the building of that, Zoser, a 4,800-year-old monument. There's the Pyramid of Meidum. There's the pyramids in Dashur. So there's many pyramids in Egypt or Kemet. There's through the area. Other than that, you have monuments that people don't even go to visit. Can you imagine that? People can pull off from the side of the road and go and take a look at these and you'll never find anybody. So you have pyramids in Nuri. You have the pyramids in Nubia near Meroe. Some say the pyramids of Meroe. This is not Meroe, but it's near Meroe. And this is kind of an aerial view or aerial design. And this is the pyramids for kings, queens, and high officials. And you have dozens and dozens and dozens of pyramids, and the designs, the layout, the shapes, a little bit different than what you see down north in Egypt. They're innovative. They're not simply imitating and copying anybody. Here's an aerial view, is way out in the desert. A lot of these sites are not easy to get to at all. But anyway, these are some of the pyramid sites. This is men with pyramids in the background. And Bagburia is this particular site. Notice that most of these had chapels in front and behind. You see the damage. Now the average person would say, yeah, well, these are very old pyramids, so I'm not surprised. They're not damaged because of age. They're damaged because of the Italian treasure hunter Ferlini. Ferlini was searching for gold, searching for treasure, climbed up looking for gold at the top of the pyramids. These are solid structures. There was never any gold in there. But that's what he was looking for. So that's why these are destroyed. So you have Ferlini from Italy and then George Reisner from Boston who went in destroying some of these monuments. This is an early photograph of George Reisner from Boston is doing the excavation work. This is in the 1920s, this particular photograph. Jebel Barkel is another important pyramid site. The Kushites were major builders, to say the least. Nobody goes here. At the time, I've never seen, oh, actually I did. This time I saw 3 or 4 people. I was going to say I've never seen anybody at the site, but saw 3 or 4 people who got out of the car to see these. But this is a vast site with a couple different pyramid fields, temples, you name it. Jebel Barkel is one of the great sites, and even here, looking for what? Gold. Rising, looking for what? Gold. So they destroy everything in their path. They're not archaeologists, they're very destructive. Here's the great Ampim temple. Everywhere you go, you see the Ampim temple. Every site, pyramids plus the Ampim temple. Everywhere. The great, yeah, the same one that people say amen to, that's the god Ammon. His name means hidden or unseen. And it goes back to the ancient Kushite period. Here you have lions on either side. This is the central axis, and the inner sanctuary would be in the back here. And they believe, you know, there's a tomb inside of the mountain area there. There's a temple, there's a tomb inside. And you can actually see, they call this Jebel Barkel, or the sacred mountain. They believe that this was a sacred mountain. And this here, the ancient Kushites believed that this was a royal crown. They believed that this was a snake or a cobra representing protection and a royal crown on top. Because the drawing is inside, where you can actually see that that was their perception. That's why they built the temple there, because they thought the mountain itself was sacred. And so this is how it was reconstructed. The temple will look something like this. This is the reconstruction of the Ammon temple at Jebel Barka, one of the great pyramid sites. And now there's a museum that's there as well, that you can go and see some of the artifacts. Here's one of the great Kushite builders, one of the rulers. This is a massive, very tall statue. Notice the youth here. Small person, you probably can't see him that well. This is made out of granite. And the fundamental symbol of African rulership is not simply a crown, but it's the beard. Chiefs, kings, you name it, pharaohs, whether it's a real beard or false beard, it's a fundamental symbol of rulership. And here I'm standing right underneath the statue. The craftsmanship is at its best. Here you got almost a 3,000-year-old structure. And here you have a close-up of these powerful Kushite rulers. Notice the juicy African kissing lips. How you gonna be affectionate without lips? They're clearly African. There's no question. They don't make a difference if somebody destroyed the nose. The lips is a telltale sign that that's us. Building on a high level, confounding the world. There you have the cobra and the typical Kushite crown. And here is a place called Kerma. And this is supposed to be the black pharaohs. Oh yeah, these are real black pharaohs. No, they all were black, including this group in the 25th dynasty. And the tallest one here is Taharqa. King Taharqa is the greatest of all the Kushite builders. Everywhere you go, up and down the Nile Valley, every pyramid site, temple site, you see the fingerprint, the DNA of the great builder Taharqa. What a builder. A massive builder. I mean, there's not too many people in the history of classical Africa that can rival the building legacy of Taharqa. I would say Ramses the Great, the second, is one, but it's not too many. And people say that, oh, you know, Ramses was a megalomaniac. He was ego-tripping because he built massive structures. No, he wasn't a megalomaniac. You just get intimidated when you see African men with that level of confidence. That's your insecurities. As a matter of fact, Ramses, he ruled about 1290 or so BCE, and there had been pyramids built almost 2,000 years, or close to almost 2,000 years before him. So if they were building for eternity, he had to keep up with the ancestors who built before him. So, but anyway, these are Kushites from the south. And this was found only about 10 years or so ago, this cachet of 7 rulers. So this is the Kerma Museum. And when you see the Kushite buildings, you see these powerful rulers. Whether it's Amalani and Sfelta, so many rulers, Taharqa, Sikimeskin, just a legacy of great rulership. And here's Taharqa, king of Kush. And the book I showed you said he was a Nubian. He's not a Nubian, he's from Kush. He's the greatest single builder of all of the Kushites. And this is, the 25th dynasty. That was an African dynasty, just like all of the ones before. It's hard to see because of the lighting. But Tanutamani, this is inside of his tomb. and he had his tomb built at another pyramid site called Kuru. Kuru is an important pyramid site. That's where they first started building pyramids, at a place called Kuru, and that's where Mana's burial site is. And buried next to him is his mother. Always the case, the mother. In some cases, we don't even know who the father was. I'm not like today when his father runs off. I mean, they just didn't list them. It's not that they weren't important. They weren't as important. Like, for example, when the Kushite kings to be coronated, do you know they had to send for their mother to officially reside over the installment. Taharka had to send for his mother hundreds of miles. She had to come and preside over his installment all the way down north. Yeah, down north in Mennefer, or so-called Memphis. And the proceedings couldn't start until his mother was the main official. Anyway, he was buried next to his mother. So there's a lot to know about Kush. Let me show you what has been happening here. And the projector, the color's a little bit off, but nevertheless, I think you can still make it out. So so let me show you what's at stake here. These are some dams that have been completed. The Aswan High Dam in 1970, and then the Merowe Dam. So here's the Nile River. It's flowing from south to north, not like I had learned, because it's a magical river. When I took my first geography class at Morgan State University, you know, I wanted to hear about the magical characteristics of the Nile. Take my first class only to find out that somebody had misled me at a lecture, and that the Nile is not magical. It follows gravity like all bodies of water. All the mountains are in the south, and water runs downhill. There's nothing magical about it. So anyway, here's the Nile flowing from south to north downhill. And what is now happening is these dams are built. So the Aswan Dam was built. This is the southern part of Egypt. And since the Nile is flowing in this direction, it created the largest man-made lake in the world. Lake Nasser, or the Nubians call it Lake Nubia. It's a 340-mile long lake. So 39 Nubian villages are at the bottom of the lake, and countless artifacts. One of the things that keeps artifacts preserved is their dryness. So much has been lost with the building of this dam. And then the border between Egypt and Sudan today is probably right around here. So as we move south, this is Sudan. The Merowe Dam was built and finished in 2008. And it flooded a 108-mile area here. And you know what? One of the great losses is that when the Merowe Dam was built, you know, and I'm a researcher, I only found one article in the Sudan Tribune that even talked about it. It's just business as usual. And what happened is this 108-mile area not only displaced 70,000 people, but in addition to that, extraordinarily, 2,500 previously unknown, unexcavated, ancient Kushite archaeological sites were also flooded. Not artifacts, 2,500 archaeological sites. So these Egyptologists, they believed that the area was, to use their term, a backwater. They didn't think anything was here. How could they not think anything was here? You have pyramids all along the area. You have elaborate temples along the area here. So why would you think this area had nothing? Then there's also great building in this area. So you got building in this area, amazing buildings in here, but suddenly you want to somehow tell us you didn't think anything was here. 2,500 previously unknown archaeological sites gone, obliterated. From Kush, talking about Kushite. And so the Aswan Dam here, it flooded an area. This is the lake. Everything under the lake, forget about it. Yeah, there's opportunities for underwater archaeology, but those that have the interest in saving the artifacts don't have the means and money. Those that have the means and money don't have an interest. And where you see underwater archaeological work, never in this area, ever. It's always in the extreme north, near Alexandria. Why? Because they're going to find artifacts relating to Greece. That's it. So that's why that's done there. So this is part of Lake Nasser, 340 mile underneath, Nubian villages, countless artifacts. Lake Nasser, or Nubians call it Lake Nubia. When the Aswan Dam was being built, temples were partially flooded during the year. And so the Phila temple was actually dismantled block by block and moved to higher ground. That's why this and some other large temples were saved, because they're made out of stone and you can dismantle them. This is not supposed to be this way. These are the temple grounds here. Notice somebody in a boat here, but the areas, this was flooded. So it was rebuilt on the island of Angelica because the Phila Island is submerged now because of the dam. And these dams are supposedly to create hydro. That's what they say. We know better because this area is a desert. And you know, deserts, there's a lot of sun, so there's solar panels that can be built. And it is cold. You think it's cold around here? It's cold at night in the desert. It is cold. So there's wind turbines, there's geothermal, there's micro hydro, there's many different forms of energy if that was really the goal. But the goal is to make money and also destroy the history at the same time. Even the great building project of Ramses the Great at Abu Simbel. Notice these massive 65-foot statues, and these are some people who came out of the temple at the right time. They're from my educational group from a few years ago. But this too would have been flooded if it wasn't dismantled block by block and elevated to a higher place on the mountain. That's what dams do. They destroy. Here's the Karanog structure. Forget about this one because it's made out of mud brick. And you can't take apart mud brick. You can take apart stone, but mud brick simply crumbles. So this is gone. We'll never know more details about this and many other art. Here's the incense burner that was found that did clearly indicate the kingdom of Tasseti was a part of Nubia, and that this indicates here 3 royal boats, 1 boat, a second one, and a 3rd boat. Anyway, this has been dated to several hundred years before Kemet in the north became organized under a central kingship. So we know really from a lot of different artifacts, but I wanted to show you this because this is the most famous, the incense burner, which is now in the University of Chicago, Oriental, notice the name, Oriental Institute Museum. So to study African artifacts, you got to go to the Oriental Institute Museum. And this here indicates a king sitting on his throne, his royal crown, royal flail, the facade of the palace, the royal bird. All these images in Tasseti, which is a part of Nubia before. This was found in the last minute before the dam flooded the area. What else would have been found? Let me show you the Merowe Dam, and then I want to move quickly past through these. 2007, I was in the area to document and record what I could before the area was flooded. So this map now is not even accurate because it doesn't show the water that is backed up. Here you can see the Aswan Dam and the water that's backed up. Because you know the water is flowing in this direction, and when dams are built, the water backs up. That's what happened with the Merowe Dam. So we have to show the backup here. Anyway, here's a closer area, a close-up of the area, the 4th cataract. A cataract is simply an area with rocks, a lot of rocks, and there's rapids, and there's 6 so-called cataracts. This is the 4th one where the Merowe Dam was built. This is just before it was completed. We got special clearance to document this, a major $1.7 billion project in Sudan. The Sudanese government initiated this, and the Chinese construction companies executed it, Chinese banks involved and others. Every sign was in 3 languages. You would always have Arabic, English, and this English said, now you have approached the construction site of the Merowe Dam project. And this is in what language do you think? Chinese, so that's why they call it a joint venture. And so I had a chance to go to the area of Hushel, the roof. This is the gold production site. This is now totally underwater. This was a gold distribution center. There's a gold rush today in the area, a major gold rush, to say the least. The Hushel, the roof was an ancient gold distribution center. And what was found is 55 large stones used for grinding rocks. And these are some of these used for grinding rocks and searching for gold. And before the dam, just before the dam was built, people were still panning for gold in the area. Hushel, the roof, forget about it. It's underwater now. There are structures like this that demanded archaeological work to figure out what this structure was. Who knows what's buried there? Shafts, all kind of things, underwater now. This is one of the boatmen that took me around in Ed Doma underwater, many tombs. forget about it. It's flooded. And by the way, if somebody had even suggested building dams in Greece, that person would be arrested on site for just the thought of building a dam that would flood remnants of ancient Europe. But they do it with impunity in these areas, different burials. Here's a Kushite pyramids, an actual pyramid site at Et Teref. Here's a close-up of it, and this is the pyramid area. This is the perimeter of it. So somewhere between the 8th to the 5th century BCE. And they had just discovered the Et Teref pyramid right before the dam was complete. And by the way, when you go to how long it takes to excavate? Decades. Literally. If you find, because these are sites that are sprawled out over acres and acres. And so there's no real detailed roadmap. You have to figure out where these artifacts are. And by the way, you never have a temple, a pyramid by itself. It's always a pyramid complex. So where are the connecting buildings? No time to excavate. It was like a hit and run archaeological campaign. You know, let's find out what's there, or let's identify the sites, list it, and keep it moving. In this case, they decided to spend a little extra time before the dam was built. So this is how the area is now. Forget about it. It's gone, underwater. Never know what was there. All of this in the name of what? Making money. That people are interested in hydroelectric projects so they can make money. It has nothing to do with helping the local people. But the Montessori told me to take this picture, video their palm trees. They said we are date farmers. This is what we live by, and they have not been compensated a dime even now. They were just protesting in Khartoum, the capital city, because they haven't received a dime for being dislocated. And these were some of the last people there who didn't want to leave because of the Merowe Dam. And they tried to blow the dam up. They really did. They did. So I was told, hey, you know what, Professor, it's not safe to aggressive. You can't go. I said, well, you know, I appreciate your input, but, you know, I grew up in the Fillmore district of San Francisco when it was a tough area. I live in Oakland, and I work in Contra Costa Colleges in Richmond, California. Anybody know those areas? They'll shoot them up and kill them up in a minute. So born in, but raised in San Francisco, living in Oakland and working in Richmond. I said, I'm perfectly safe over there. I'm in the high risk zone at home. So it's no big deal. So I go by myself because my colleague had dysentery that day. We got stuck in the desert for 8 hours, no water. It was absolutely burning hot in the middle of the summer. And somebody walked about 2 miles to a defunct train station, got some water. I looked at it, I said, I'm not drinking that. And what color do you think that was? It was brown. It was brown and tan. They drank it, and my buddy got sick. So the day we needed to go behind the dam, he was too sick to go, and people say it's not safe to go. I went, and these were the nicest brothers. And our biggest laugh is when I told them that I was told not to go because they were too aggressive. And by the way, the LA Times newspaper says that they said that 70,000 Arab farmers would be displaced. I didn't find them to be Arab at all. Let's be serious. They're just making up things as they go along. No Arab farmers. So these are they're date farmers. All of that's gone now. Palm trees are gone. If you wanted to know more, by the way, if you went to montessori.org, you can see their video footage of them going back to their homeland, their villages, and videotaping what's underwater now. All you see is the top of the palm trees. Everything else underwater. So anyway, they were dismissed into El Mutag and other desert environments. So you can pump as much water you want in the desert. It's not going to make any difference. These are farmhouses. We're not going to be able to farm. Now, okay, here's what's happening now. There's 4 additional dams in the area. The Dow Dam, Kashbar Dam, the Sharik, and the Atbar Dam. So now the Sudanese government threatens to turn the Nile River into a series of isolated lakes. No longer a living entity. So they're destroying the villages, the artifacts, and the ecology, all in the name of money. It has nothing to do with helping the people. They've even admitted, just like the Ethiopian government has admitted it, that the goal is not to help the local people, but is to export the energy. To do what? Make money. That's what it's about here. And so all these dams here are being built. So you have the Dow, so we know the Aswan and Merowe Dam were built. You have the Dow Dam at the Second Cataract. There's the Cash Bar at the 3rd cataract. There's the Sharif Dam at the 5th cataract. And then there's the Upper Atbar Dam. And all of these are the contracts have already been signed with the Chinese construction firms. So now they're just trying to figure out how to go and restart, because they started the Caspar area and they dug up quite a lot of human remains and other things, and the local Nubians said, nope, not on our watch. So they ran the government out of the Caspar Dam area. This is the flashpoint. So now they're trying to figure out strategically how do they go back in and continue with these projects. Something I didn't know until last month is about the Rasiris Dam. I knew about the Rasiris Dam, but I didn't know. I had no idea, even though I'm doing work in the area, that this Rasiris Dam is also in work. So when I arrived in December, a couple months ago in Sudan, they had just raised the Rasiris Dam and flooded an area. Here's Khartoum, the capital city. So south of there is a Rasiris Dam. I didn't even know about this. I didn't even know. That's why you have to continue to do the field work. And this flooded the whole area. I don't even know the effects of this. This wasn't even announced. I was able to, let me speed this up. I was able, along with my colleague, to meet with Dr. Muhammad, who's the head of the main organization in Sudan, the National Corporations of Antiquities and Museums. And here he is here. And I was explaining to him our project, and so that we can get the permits to go to the archaeological sites. And it's kind of hard to light in here, but here he is. What he has in his hand, you can't see it too well, but he has our Save Nubia calendar. I was promoting the project. And my colleague here, he has something in his hand, and this is our Save Nubia pen. And let me show you the pen. It's not only a nice writing pen, but also a flashlight too. And one day, we have these today, and one day I forgot the flashlight. And we were in the tombs last month, so what did I do? I pulled out my Save Nubia pen. I took some notes, but also I doubled down and used it in the tomb as well. And you don't really see what I have here in front of me, but it's our Save Nubia 2013 pocket calendar. So I was promoting the cause when I was there, to say the least. So anyway, he I think would be an important contact for us, Dr. Muhammad, because there's a lot of field work that has to be done. His organization, INCAM, actually went to England recently and made an appeal to archaeologists around the world that we need you to come in because these dams will be built. We need you to come in and document what's possible. So anyway, let me move past this. One thing I didn't know in the National Museum, this was a little bit surprising to me, but I understood why they did it. In the National Museum in Khartoum, there's a special room now, and in this special room, the Sudanese government, the Dams Implementation Unit, the Sudanese government, they now have a special room dedicated to dams, and they had this exhibit. They had a special exhibit in March through June of last year, and they actually lay out the dams along the Nile. I didn't think they would be that open and bold, but the whole room is showing literally the dam projects, the archaeological sites that have been and will be flooded. So they're just out there with it now. They want the public to get used to the fact that these sites are not going to be here. So take a good look while you can. I didn't think that they would promote it like that, but they did. And I didn't know about this. So anyway, I know you can't make this out, but wherever you see names or red dots, these are all archaeological sites. And this is the Nile in the middle. All these areas have been mapped. These are archaeological areas that will be flooded. They will be flooded. That's why we organized the Save Nubia project. And the reason why we chose the name Save Nubia is because people are more familiar with the name Nubia. People say my Nubian king, my Nubian queen. And so, but the focus of our campaign is to save Kush and Nubia. We didn't really use the name Kush because you have to explain it more. And most young people, when they think about Kush, you know, the only thing they think about is marijuana. Smoking some marijuana from India.
Yes, ma'am.
Somewhere. So, like, I remember one young guy, he was at a presentation, he had his head down, uninspired, uninterested. I said, Kush. So, did you say Kush? I said, yes, young brother, but I mean something differently. And then online, when we put our map online of Kush, this young guy, man, what do you mean Kush? Civilization of Kush, I never heard that before. When we say Kush, I said, I know what you mean when you say Kush. This is what I mean when I say Kush. I'm glad you asked. I'm talking about the civilization. So here you got additional dams that haven't even been talked about. January, February 2011. The National Corporation. So they were surveying. This is a survey of some other dam areas. And by the way, there's more than one way to spell dam area, by the way.
Damn.
So anyway, these are sites here. Notice the different prehistoric. 14 sites will be flooded. The post-Meroitic, 15. Christian area, 4. Altogether, 117. Just on the east bank of the Mogret area. What about the east bank of the Gash area? The Kerma, they don't know the period, maybe Kerma, but 2 sites, 12 post-Meroitic, 12 Christian. And I'll skip down another 145 sites just in this area. And they just bold with it. So these are sites, not simply artifacts, but every site is filled with artifacts. So that's what's at stake here. Here you got another 168. That's what's in the museum there. They have a whole list of the sites that were flooded with the Merowe Dam when that was finished in 2008. This whole room has all this information. Can you make out this artifact or what this image is? Okay, you're like a giraffe. This is so you have some of the most important rock art all over Africa will be flooded. This one they just happened to save and put in the museum, but there's rock art everywhere. So anyway, I was pleased with what we were able. This is right before we actually went out in the field. So I got a pretty good idea of some of the archaeological sites because we needed to survey. And that's what our goal is, to survey the area so we can go back and do more systematic research. So with our Save Nubia project is really to raise the resources. We need $50,000 to do the work with a documentary being the result of our work. And so here's a map of Nubia. It's kind of washed out because of the projector, but anyway, this area here is Nubia. Now remember I was showing you earlier that the large area was Kush. Within Kush you have Nubia. And so this was Nubia was never any larger than this area. It was a part of Kush. And so current day Nubians live in this area and ancient Nubia. Sometimes this is the third cataract. Sometimes Nubia was a little bit further north. But anyway, this is all Nubia. And where you see these red lines that represent dams that will be built. And so Nubians are the most active group in protesting against this. Let me move through these fast. There's a Dow Dam at the second cataract where there's major archaeological sites that will be flooded. It's going to flood a 40-mile area. And so Nubian homes will definitely be flooded. Here's Dab Shambo. It's very helpful in our area as we surveyed the area with his family. These are all Nubians. All families will be displaced if the Dow Dam is built. Dab Shambo got the young brothers to take me to the area. So I go across the Nile to Kulma Island. You have structures like this that will certainly be flooded. Forget about it, they're not going to survive. You have pot fragments, bones. So excavation work hasn't really been done very thoroughly at all. You have other structures in the Dow area that will be, this is all going to be flooded, submerged. So I showed you Kush earlier, now this is the Nubian region. All of this is now Nubia. We have a brother here, Ehab. It took 2 days out of his schedule to help us. Didn't want to dine. The hospitality was thoroughly after. Here's the doctor. Now the doctor was helping me here, and because his brother Sorowat wasn't able to help me when I went to this area, and he was so excited. I don't know why people do this. He's running ahead to touch everything. He said, "Doctor, this is my work. You stay in your lane, and you let me stay in my lane and do what I do." So he's running into every structure to look at everything. He wants his picture taken. It's all over the place. He's touching, moving things. I said, hands off. Because when you go to a site, you have to take photographs and video in the situation in which you found it. You know, so we call it in situ photographs. You take the photo in the situation in which you found it, so you can document your find. We went across the Nile to very hot, to a place called Sai Island, a huge island. There's archaeological sites all over the island that will be flooded. There's churches, there's fortresses, there's many different things. And these are old columns from the temple. I know that because they were building, these are in granite. They built with granite, and you got pot fragments everywhere. All this will be flooded. You have remains of old buildings that will be flooded. Rich archaeological area because of the amount or the quantity of pottery. Here you got, you see the bottom of that, a lot of pot fragments, other structures from different time periods. All this island will be human remains, bones everywhere. Everywhere. Bones everywhere, different tombs. Here's the doctor. I said, doctor, I told you to stay in your lane. Don't go in there. I need to document it for him. He's so excited. Because he's learned about his own culture too. And here you have burials just out in the open. Here's a skull. Sorry to show you this, but if I don't, you won't know what's there. Here's the skull, back of the skull, the eye socket, the mouth area. And just thrown about. Here's teeth. You see this emperor looking for gold jewelry. Here's the body. This is the back. This is the back of the head. You see this kind of thing in the field. This still has to be excavated, but this will be flooded if the dam is built. Bones thrown everywhere. Unfortunately, here's a skull. Bottom of the skull is here. Hair still on the skull. And so let me move forward. So you see, there's mummies that are there. It's ancient and modern. Notice the similarities. So a lot of this we won't be able to thoroughly document because of the destruction shafts. We still don't have. It's kind of dark. Anyway, but this rich archaeological areas. There's been some excavation work, but it's not complete yet. This is this home of a Nubian brother that took us in and showed us around. And helped us to get to the site. Beautiful home. Look at the design of the floors. Typical home. He had a message. He said they need international help. I have a videotape of him calling for help. And he said, all we have is the Nile. This is our family. This is our mother. This is our father. This is our heritage. This is all I know. So he's calling for help. And I have an interesting tape of him appealing. The solar temple could be jeopardized as well. And when you see people like this, it's hot, it's burning hot, but they're going out in the desert to look for gold. You see young guys, that's the occupation. They're poor, they look for gold. You see tents, these are gold mining individuals or companies. Now our driver, this is Khaled. Was telling Khaled, look, Khaled, getting to these sites are very difficult. They're off-road. They're not easy to get to. You need to slow down. We don't really have the right kind of vehicle. And I said, Khaled, this is the only vehicle you have. Stop the rush. So my colleague is trying to explain to him to slow your behind down. It's because this is our car. We definitely weren't. We didn't have the right vehicle, trust me. So this off-road stuff is difficult. All the places I've traveled to in the world, the sedan is the most difficult. It is difficult. It is, it's tough, folks. It's dirty. It's tough. Only way I can get through it, honestly, I just got to think about what we're going to be accomplishing the next day. Because if I focus on the conditions, oh man. And so here we are, going to it's difficult to get to. And so, this guy's driving like a madman, so I said, I better take a picture of Khaled now. Because his mother, the last I saw of him, because this man's driving like a maniac. So I said, let me take his footprints, because I might not see the man. I might not see him again. I might as well document what happened. What happened to him. He's driving like a madman. How you gonna get through this? This is crazy, right? Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And there's no signs anywhere. It is difficult to get to the site, even if you know where they are. And so I've never in my life, ever, all the work I've done in the desert for 20, I've never seen so many dead camels before. Dead camels everywhere. And of course, you know, really you don't see too many cars. So I said, you know what, this is so amazing. I'm going to have to take pictures to at least, if we don't make it out of it, at least if I find my camera. So you got a camera here, and I told Khaled, I'm going to take this for you. This going to be you next. You keep driving like a madman. And this is where we're going to send your family. He said, well, this is the last one. Okay, so anyway, difficult travel. We tried different methods in the past with, you know, crazy buses like this. That's what happens when you really don't have the funds. Like I said, I've never been broke. We just didn't have the cash flow we needed. And it was amazing. The driver got in, he pulled this thing up, poured some liquid, and it started. I was shocked. I don't know how he did that. And we drove off. One of the most ridiculous rides ever. And then I've tried other methods to get to these sites. So here's the back. The pyramids near Meroe here, and if you look at the bottom right, this is the mode of transportation to get there, the donkey. And I told myself I wasn't going to ride a donkey anymore. It's too difficult, too slow, but I've never seen a donkey move that fast before to get to the site. And we've tried other vehicles. Here we're stuck. This is where we got stuck for 8 hours, and so the guys had to walk about 1.5 miles to climb the mountain to get cell phone reception. And the driver was totally irresponsible. He never told us that he had a bad clutch until after the fact. And we stuck out in the desert. Nothing, and somebody had the great idea to go, so we had one of the local guys with us. He goes, climbs the mountain, comes back, and I'm the only one that had water. You talk about a lack of planning. It's completely ridiculous. And so I didn't have that much, and I said, you know what? I'm hot, and this is difficult. It's 12 noon, it's burning hot, and but the guy that went, I said, you know, I'm looking at my water, I'm looking at him, looking at my water. I said, no. But I said, you know what? I think I should, because the man's a hero. He went, he made the call to the local town to bring the equipment, and then I was shocked. This is like a camel. He took the smallest sip, and then he gave my water of all people to the driver, who was drinking my water. I was so de-energized at that point, I couldn't even stop this madness from taking place. All I could do was record it. And so we were stuck for 8 hours there. But it's difficult getting to the site. So the Solar Temple, I don't know if this is going to survive or not, because there's no feasibility study to show exactly how widespread the flooding will be. It's not in the government's interest to give those facts. So the Solar Temple, this is part of it. It is certainly not out of the woods. It may be under threat. And here's one of the men that works for Ampim, Fauzi. He was leading a group from Australia, and me and my colleague here. It's kind of hard to see this, but I was kind of looking at some of the inscriptions. I noticed some interesting things that I had noticed before at the Solar Temple. And it's one of the great temples in the north. And this could be flooded by the third cataract. I'm sorry, the second cataract, the Dow Dam, very possibly. This is me here. These are some, here's Khaled. And these are some Nubian brothers. This is Hawaii. When we got to the area, we were trying to figure out how do we get to the next site, because it's like there's no signs anywhere. Our car was in jeopardy. The man's driving like a madman. So what Howard did, he took 2 days out of his schedule. He said, look, I'll show you. I have a truck. And I said to my colleague, well, tell him that, because we were speaking in Arabic, so tell him that we'll pay for, because Nubians can't accept any money. They do this because of their humanity. There's no money, because it reduces their humanity to receive money for anything. I said, okay, well, tell Howard that we'll pay for his gas coming back. He said, no, can't do that either. So the only solution for him was for him to ride with us. So he rides with us to another site, Sesbi, or the people call it Seysab, which was a long journey. So he stays with us, make sure that we saw everything we needed to see, that we document everything, and then he catches a local transportation back home and asks for nothing. And you can't offer because it's disrespectful. You mean to tell me that you want to reduce my humanity with money? It doesn't work that way. And the Nubian hospitality is amazing. That's why I learned a little bit, but in 2007 when I went, I wasn't prepared. I really wasn't. because they will feed you and feed you and feed you. They don't even have to know you. And I gained 10 pounds in 2 weeks because it was African hospitality that had gone haywire. This time I figured out some strategies to not gain weight. It's amazing. So the Cash Bar Dam is a third cataract here. It's going to flood out numerous sites. That's the Cash Bar would be here. So let me show you, if this takes place, what will happen. They built a fence, barbed wire fence around some of the buildings, but the Nubians had a confrontation with the police, so they ran them out of the area. So, see, this is a cataract here. There's a lot of rocks. So they build dams, or project to build dams at cataract areas because of the rocks are very sturdy. And that's why they choose it. But there's village life here, the village here, the Cash Bar village, there's Jetty, there's Cebu, and the people came out of their villages to challenge the Sudanese government and the Chinese excavation workers because they dug up 161 burials. And the people said enough is enough. You will not desecrate these sites. And so they were peacefully protesting, the local people, and there was a confrontation with the police, which you actually can see on YouTube. But anyway, remember I showed you that artifact that was in the museum? If you go to the Cash Bar area, you find rock art everywhere. This is where you see horses and giraffes, many different things you see. Now take a look. Now you take a look at this, you take a look here, look at the shape. You see the rock art, and then you see an artifact. This is an Afro comb. And notice a 5,000-year-old comb, but in the shape of what? More like a horse. All this is going to be gone. Notice here. Notice the rock art. All that will be flooded. Rock art everywhere. And this is where the site of the protest and the confrontation where the Sudanese police shot down 4 innocent people. So the tear gas turned into live rounds. You can see them. This was in June 2007. That's why the government is slow to go back in. They don't know what to do. So the Nubians in the Cash Bar area, you know when somebody says, you will do this over my dead body? They mean that literally. And the government knows that. So they don't know where they're going. So near the Cash Bar area, you have the rock art. But there's also a place called Tumbas. And the Tumbas area is really close by there. And here is the archaeological director for the site, One. And what he's doing here, he's chastising all the people because this is New Year's Day. We were there on New Year's Day, and he is challenging all these people to get out of the site. This is an archaeological site. It's not there for you to be picnicking and at the site. So here he's writing down the plate numbers and telling the people, you need to go. You shouldn't be here. And the people are kind of listening, then they're not listening. So this man here, people everywhere, this is New Year's Day, so you have couples, behind the rock doing their thing. You got families out with all of the picnic stuff. And this man here, he's saying to One, he said, look, you don't have a sign here. It doesn't say, the sign doesn't say archaeological site. The sign that you don't have a rope or anything there. And he actually is making a good point. So you have a man just explaining, well, why do we have to go? I agree, the site is really a beautiful site, but it's some of the most important rock art. This is what One is trying to, and these people were scattering, they got all their drinks and their food, and there was garbage everywhere, I must say that. Trash, garbage, and everywhere. This is the only group that really listened to them. And they kind of took their picnicking and all their fun outside of the archaeological site. So this is me. I decided to take a picture with them, but nobody else listened. So they gave us some those other things, peaceful ending. But what's at the site? Look at this. Look at what will be flooded. This is Medu Nature, so-called hieroglyphic text at its best. This is what? Notice this is the duck. This is the sage plant. This means the son of the king. This says beloved Mary, and this is kind of broken off, but beloved, this probably would be the guy's name. On rocks everywhere, you have these kind of inscriptions. Notice his One, the archaeological director that took us around. Here is the king's name. Here's a double crown. Same thing here, the king's name in the shinu or cartouche, king's name. All of this would be flooded. And by the way, this is the shape of a stela, which is really the origins of the modern tombstone, because it gives information about the person buried. And here you have rock art here, and it's hard to see, but there's inscriptions on the rocks everywhere. You have inscriptions here, different hieroglyphic text. This is in the Tumbas area. There's a fallen statue of a king, of a ruler, just thrown there. And this is a man's. This is row one here to give you an idea of the size of the statue. So our goal is to document what we could so that we can raise the issue that these should be World Heritage Sites under threat. We need the United Nations to say, you know what, this belongs not only to Africans but to World Heritage. They should be World Heritage Sites that are under threat. So that would provide protections that they don't have. And how can these not be considered World Heritage Sites? So that's really what my work is. So that's why I'm doing this pioneering work. And then there's this Sharik Dam. Let me show you something about the Sharik Dam in the Fifth Category. I'm pretty much finished. Okay, here's the Sharik Dam, right? And we know the Nile is flowing in this direction. So since the Nile is flowing from south to north, where would the water back up at if this dam is built? In this direction or this direction?
South.
South, below, right, or really above. So guess what? Here's the Sharik Dam. Here is Meroe, or Bagawia is right here. How do we know? How do we know that these areas are safe? Because the water's going to back up. How do we know? We don't know. We don't know. And that's one of the issues. We don't know how much is going to back up. Who knows that these pyramids are safe? We can't say for sure. Nobody knows. Maybe the government knows, but they haven't. Let me just show you the last thing. There's also the capital city of Meroe, where there's 20 to 25,000 people. One thing I can say that was an improvement, this was an old beat up, tattered sign. It says Road City. Now they have a better sign. The only problem is there's no direction to get you to the site. You got to find the site to even see the sign. So my colleague was telling the guy, why do you have the sign at the site itself when you have to drive through the desert with no direction to find the area? And if I had not been there, there'd been no way to find it. I'm telling you, there's no way to find it. Anyway, this is the central axis of the Ampim temple there. You have remains of columns and lions. This is an amazing structure. You got all kinds of things at the royal city. Again, 20 to 25,000 people. There's so much work to be done regarding the Kush. Let me just skip. And then we have a little relaxation. Kind of hard to see, but this is the White Nile of the Nile, white branch of the Nile, right near Khartoum. And there's the brothers. You know, the brothers had to spend a little time together just talking about what brothers talk about.
Sisters.
The sisters were at home that day. This is the brothers talking.
Yeah.
And so the Nile there, yeah, you can see it better here. And then there was a wedding too. Sheza is here in the States. She's at Howard. No, I'm sorry. She's at Georgetown. She's at Georgetown in D.C. And then they had, you know, some ceremonies leading up to it. The family was Nubia. And then we did make it back. This is this is kind of the driver. And we're glad he made it back after we told him how wild he was on the road. And this is right before the wedding that Sheza had. And so this is it. So here are some of the government officials. Bashir, you say, who's building the government. It's not Arabs. These are Africans who might be Arab-minded, but they are certainly Africans building dams for what? For money. That's it. There's no other reason. And that's why Chancellor Williams says this is a great issue that we need to be aware of. And that's what drives me day in and day out to follow in his footsteps by doing field research. And you know what? I'll tell you one thing that Chancellor Williams taught me. He said, you know what? The research that took me 16 years to do, I could have did it in 3 to 4 years if I had a team. But he said when you're working with black folks, you'll be waiting forever to pull the team together. So if he had waited on the team, he'd have never did the work. He did the work, he needed the team, but the team never came together. And I recognize that. I said, you know what, I'm not waiting on anybody. So I just went and started to do the work. So now we have an actual organization that we formed, and we're now building momentum. So that's why I want to thank Brother Namdi and others for making this available for me to share with you, because I know you're going to tell everybody you know, your friends, your family members, your neighbors, your colleagues, and you. Our second goal is to get UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, to designate these Nubian and Kushite areas as World Heritage Sites under threat. What's going to take place for that to happen is for us, for me, really, to have a high-level professional DVD that we can compete qualitatively with anything that you would ever see on the History Channel, Discovery Channel, learning to raise the question that when you tell me that this is not at the height of human achievement, how do you not protect these sites? So that's what our goal is. And then thirdly, to build local museums in the area. So EHAB, who I showed you earlier, who gave the appeal, that's part of our goal, is to help build museums. And I think we can achieve all these goals. So our site is a Save Nubia, so it's a Save Nubia project. I'm the director, and so it's savenubia.org. So that's the briefest introduction that I can give you about our project. So thank you very much. I'm Professor Manu, Ampim.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. One thing we're going to do is, and also as part of the Barry Williams Historical Society, one thing that we do, and it's part of a tradition of bringing the professor in, is a tradition that goes back over 100 years in Youngstown, when P. Ross Berry and Samuel Stewart invited George Washington Williams to come to Youngstown to lecture on history. So this is a tradition that goes back a long way. And we have to support our people as we see this is very important. What he's talking about it is so important. And if you travel to the continent of Africa, if you've been to Europe, and these monuments that are on the continent of Africa, and if you've been to Greece.
Cynthia Jackson, Youngstown, Ohio. I love the presentation. We must do all we can giving and supporting these type of projects, and thanking our professors that take their monies and go over and do this for us. We must preserve our heritage. Thank you.
About the presentation.
My name is Gerald Wallace. I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, and I thought the presentation was very excellent in its presenting me for knowledge about the Nubian area and distinguishing the Nubian Kush area from the Egyptian Arab area. Now that I know the difference, I would like to be able to contribute some way financially or even just by word of mouth to help the project.
About the presentation.
Okay, I'm Nikki Davis, and I was born and raised in West Virginia. I went to college at Tennessee State in the 60s. I've been a Delta Sigma Theta sorority for 51 years, and I've been a political activist, and I'm on the mayor's task force here in Youngstown, and I'm also on a committee against domestic violence, and I'm just, a community leader. So, being here, this is my church, by the way, St. Augustine, and I'm just so proud that we were able to put on, or have Vince do the presentation with the gentleman who did it. I think that the world, I don't know where to look, but I think that the world needs to have more programs and people going around like this. And the thing that's so sad to me is that because the world is not interested in things that were like presented here, because there's no big push because it doesn't affect as many people as they think. I think it does, and it should. It's a world event, and I'm going to try to do my best. I'm a public relations person, so I hope to go around and do. I wish the Vindicator had been here today, because Ernie Brown and our people that work with the Vindicator should know about this. So I hope somebody does an article about the presentation and sends it to Ernie Brown at the Vindicator, please. I'm on television a lot, so I'll remember to talk about this. Andrea Mahone has a program, Madonna Chisholm and Dee Crawford on TV around here. And I think this issue needs to be discussed more. And it just makes me so sad that it has not become a major issue in the world. And my sorority is going to the United Nations in March. But we always go, we go to, we go to Washington to see the legislators, but we also have a group of Deltas that go to the UN every year. And I think somebody needs to present there. But also, get this on the History Channel and all of those, they have BET on the news and everything. Instead of running these rap things, run some stuff like this by our young people, because our young people are our future, and that's what we need.
I'm Ella Robinson. I'm a member of this church since 1954, and I was involved with getting Vince interested in this kind of work, and Vince and I go way back.
My name is Renee Newell, and I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, and I thought this presentation was very awesome, overwhelming, and we do need to take participation in this, and hope all goes well with this Nubian project. Thank you.
My name is Rose Wilkins. I'm from Youngstown, Ohio. I thought the project was very good. I did buy a couple ink pens and stuff like that to try to help out. I'm also going to send in some money to the website to help out with the Nubian project, because I think it's very important that we do know our history. Our younger kids and stuff, the parents are just not teaching the kids about our history. A lot of kids don't even know about Martin Luther King, which is a shame. It ain't been that long ago that the man died. He died for our freedoms and stuff like that. But we're going to have to just try to get into the public schools and stuff. And not just the public schools, the churches too. We need to know about our history. Everybody else know about theirs. We need to know about ours.
Okay, Charles Penny here in Youngstown, Ohio. And I know the term's been used before, but it is just a damn shame. I mean, all of the information, I mean, it's just the way it's being just dismissed and disrespected. I mean, all this history ready to be just covered up and ignored, just like, just total disrespect. Just total disrespect. But we all know it's done for a reason, to keep us from looking in the mirror and seeing who, you know, as African people in America, we are, and all over the world. I mean, it's just a shame. It's disheartening, man. It just gets you emotional. It really does when you hear what Brother Ampim was saying, and the information he projected to us, man. It just gets me riled up. It just gets you emotional, and that's the way I'm feeling right now. Very.
This is Brother Raw's son, coming at you live from Youngstown, Ohio. We had a good lecture here on Ethiopia, Kush. It was very informative. It was about the flooding of the different ancient artifacts down there that we as African people must pick up our pace and do something about. You know, donate money, take that voyage and go see our African brothers and sisters, and just give our support and everything. It was a real good lecture, and I'm looking forward to going to Africa and doing my part. Thank you.
Today.
I'm Professor Amin Assad from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm in Youngstown, Ohio at a conference dealing with artifacts from Nubia. And it was most interesting, very informative, very educational, and it's a real tragedy that these sites might be buried underwater when the dams were built. So hopefully they'll get their grant money, they'll get a team together, and they'll get the United Nations to stand up for them and recognize that this is a historical site and it needs to be preserved. I thank you. Take care.